Welcome to the Book Binge. I'm your host, King Crusoe. You can call me KC, and today we are back to our regularly monthly scheduled reading wrap-up and TBR video. Last month, of course, I did not do one of these like normal because I basically just covered my 5 favorite books of the year so far because I didn't really read very much in either May or June. So it was like, why am I going to do one of these monthly reading wrap-ups if there's really nothing to say in it? So that's basically what I did last month. This month, we're back to things just kind of being more like normal. And I would say July for reading ended up being like fine, I guess. It wasn't as good as I wanted it to be. The last week and the first week combined are basically the brunt of the reason why July wasn't as good of a reading month as I would have liked for it to be. But, you know, that's just kind of how things go sometimes. Let's get right into it. No need to waste any more time. I've had way more videos over the last couple weeks go way longer than I feel like they should have, so let's not do that this time around. Starting off, of course, with the wrap-up, everything that I did read in July. So the main thing of note is that I continued and actually finished We Who Wrestle with God by Jordan Peterson. In July, I basically intended to start getting back to this book and reading it a little bit more full-time, getting back into it a little bit more officially, we'll say, and hopefully, you know, getting good progress towards finishing it, because of course I did start this pretty shortly after it came out last December. Yeah, I believe it came out like November 22nd or something in 2024. And I started it, I think, in December, and then read a little bit in like July. January. I don't think I actually got any of it read between like February and June because I was just too busy. I always wanted to circle back around to it, but I read the final like 2/3 or so that I had remaining in July and had a good time with it. Most of those remaining parts that I had not read yet were actually really, really good and, you know, shifted my perspective on certain things in ways that I am pretty appreciative of. I had a great time finishing that book, and frankly, just really glad to be able to say the book's done. It's not hanging over my head anymore. I don't have any more books hanging over my head at this point from like, you know, months or years of waiting. I have one that I DNF'd, but that's about it. Next up, I did read Winter's Heart by Robert Jordan, the 9th book of the Wheel of Time. And let's just say that this is not anywhere near my favorite Wheel of Time book. In fact, a lot of people might be surprised where I would ultimately rank that thing at the end of the day because, well, I was pretty underwhelmed by a lot of it. There was a significant chunk of the first like third of the book basically where I just kind of struggled with a lot of things, and when I stopped struggling with things as much in terms of the pace, I was struggling with them in terms of how much information, how many names and stuff were just kind of being thrown out there, because, you know, it's just Robert Jordan's way. As soon as something is actually happening, it's just 1.5 million names, and then you can't tell who's doing what anymore. And then the back half of the book was a lot better. I will say it was definitely a lot better than the front half, but I also had a lot of issues with all of that as well. If you want more information on any of that, you can of course watch any of my reading diaries on those videos if you've read the book. If you have not, I will have a review coming out for that, I believe this coming Tuesday, if I'm not mistaken. So next week, I guess, would probably be the proper term. So I believe that's when I'll be covering that more fully and talking about it a little bit more in depth. Another thing that I did in July was I started my reread of Howling Dark. I do not believe I had started this yet by the time I did the last one of these videos, but I did start my reread of this. Not as far as I was hoping to be by this point in time, but I am still basically on track to finish by the end of August, so I guess that's kind of a little spoiler teaser for this month's reading for the TBR. I do plan to finish Howling Dark by the end of the month, but it's just really special being able to reread this again, as is the case with Empire of Silence. Both of these books I had reread in 2023 after having read them both in 2022 already, but now that I'm through Disquiet Gods and at this point Shadows Upon Time, these books take on even more new meaning that is just absurd and insane to be reading through. It's just really special. I don't think anything will ever top Sun Eater as my favorite series, and each time I reread one of these books, it just kind of proves a little bit more why. But yeah, been enjoying this on my reread so far, but that is about that. On a short story side of things, I did read one short story in July that was The Wages of Sin by Christopher Ruocchio, which is the 4th story in his sort of Adaman little like sword and sorcery type of inspired series. And I like all of these stories, but I would say that the previous story, the third one, The Pilgrim Road, was by far my least favorite of them. The Wages of Sin, this fourth one, completely turned that around. Maybe my favorite one of the Adamant stories. It is fantastic. So if you are a member of Christopher's Patreon at the $10 tier or above, if I'm not mistaken, or you can wait until the 10th for this to come out. If you're a member at the $10 tier, you'll have access to this when it comes out. Or if not, or if you're just interested in buying this story separate, you don't really want to become a member of the Patreon, you ought to be able to purchase the story. I think probably just for $5 or something like that on August 10th when it comes out. Really great story. If you've read or enjoyed any of the Adamant stuff, this one's good. High recommendation from me. So at this point, it is time to talk about the book of the month. That is everything that I read in July. And I know it's technically cheating, but yeah, my book of the month is going to be We Who Wrestle with God by Jordan Peterson. I know I read like a third, maybe even a little bit more than a third of the book before, July. But all things considered, I am still willing to consider things for book of the month, even if I didn't read them all in that month. This is just the month that I finished We Who Wrestle with God, and given that I read the majority of the book in July, it felt fitting enough. I definitely enjoyed this a lot more than Winter's Heart. At the end of the day, Winter's Heart had some good stuff in it, but overall, didn't love it. But We Who Wrestle with God was one where there are multiple sections of this book that are just great. I think like parts 3 and 6 especially are probably my two favorites overall. But part like what is it, 7 or something? 8. Parts 3, 6, and 8 are probably my favorite parts of the book. But overall, it's just really good, really enjoyable to be able to get, a sort of psychological perspective on religious stories and guess that kind of perspective on why religious stories are important, whether or not you believe in them, and what they tell about humanity and our psychological tendencies. That whole kind of sphere of stuff. I just really enjoyed We Who Wrestle with God, and I'm greatly looking forward to the sequel. I'm just really upset. The one thing that I do not like about We Who Wrestle with God is that Peterson decided to skip a lot of stuff and go to like Jonah, which is very far into the Old Testament, whereas basically everything else was covered in like the Torah, for example. So like the story of Adam and Eve and Cain and Abel and like Noah. The Tower of Babel was also kind of random, relatively speaking, but it did fit into his overall thesis. And then he also had stuff on Abraham. And like all of that material was really good. And Jonah, the section on Jonah was also kind of relevant to what was going on. But it also seemed a little bit random to just jump all the way out there, especially when he skipped Joseph. Like my favorite part of Genesis of the Bible is the story of Joseph. Not just the Technicolor Dreamcoat part of it, but like the entire part of it, captivity in Egypt and everything else. Like there's just so much to that story that is really good that I feel like could have really, really been utilized in We Who Wrestle with God. And I'm sad that Peterson did not take any of that stuff, because like the Abraham material was like some of my favorite in the entire book. So I would have really liked to see how he explored Jacob in there. But aside from that gripe, I really enjoyed my time with it. But now we are going to actually jump into the TBR section of this, and I might have accidentally showed off some stuff over there. The main thing that I need to do right now is finish While Darkness Gathers. I technically could have covered this in, the wrap up, because I'm like 2/3 of the way through. But realistically, most of what I have read of this so far was in August. I intended to read this book before August came around. It did not happen. I read like 60 pages of the 290 pages or so last Monday, so technically still in July. But the rest of what I've read so far has been in August, and I haven't even finished. By the time this video comes out, I will probably have finished or just be finishing currently. But I decided to include this in the TBR because it's like kind of in that weird space. This is an August read for me. So far as I have read, I've been really enjoying it. It's been really great to be back in the world of Jormungand, particularly with the perspectives that we're in. And I've really enjoyed the way that Philip has done POV in this book. Definitely the right style of jumping between the handful of different POVs, and all of the chapters being just a few pages basically, so it makes it really easy to continue and work through, as opposed to like The Return of Adan, or Return to Adan, sorry, the third book in that trilogy, which, you know, is great. One of my favorite reads of 2023, but man, those chapters are pretty long. Like, they're all 20 to 30 pages basically. They're just lengthy. Having really short chapters that jump between POVs quite distinctly in this one has been such a breath of fresh air. And speaking of breath of fresh air, it's super short, so that's been really nice so far. I'll be sure to update you guys next month on what I think of the rest of that book, but this month, basically this week, again, like I said, by the time this video is out, I'm probably finishing that book. That is what I'm going to do. After I am done with While Darkness Gathers, and, you know, outside of continuing to read Howling Dark, I said that I'd be continuing that through the rest of the month. Basically just a couple chapters a day, every day until I'm done, is basically what I'm doing with that. Otherwise, my primary read is Don Quixote by Miguel de Cervantes Saavedra, and really looking forward to this book. Unfortunately, at this point in time, given, you know, some real life stuff going on, given how busy I'm going to be with certain video projects and non-video projects for that matter, and some other stuff that I can't talk about right now, I'm not going to be able to read all of Don Quixote this month. Like, that's just not going to happen. I might have been able to manage it like the way I was starting to plan to, if I had actually read all of While Darkness Gathers in July, and especially if I'd been able to get that done before the end of last week, and I did not. So this isn't going to have enough time to be read all this month. It's just not going to happen. So instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to read part 1 of the book this month. In case you don't know, Don Quixote is split into 2 parts. Each is approximately half of the book, and I believe part 2 was written somewhere like a decade after the first part was, or something like that. So it makes sense to kind of split the 2 parts out a little bit. I'm going to read part 1 this month, and at the end of the month, I'm going to have a spoiler diary, a spoiler discussion on this first half of the book, kind of my thoughts on it as a whole. And then the goal is in September to read part 2, or depending on how quickly I can read part 1, start part 2 this month, and get through that, you know, within the first week or 2 of September. Like, I'm not going to be able to read all nearly 1,000 pages of this book in August by itself. It's going to bleed into September for sure. So either way, the point is, this is the main thing on my TBR right now, and I'm really looking forward to it. There's just part of it that has that kind of summer vibe that I feel like it's going to give me. Every time I think about reading it, summer seems like the right time, so I want to read it now before we get into next year, especially since I more or less promised that I would read that book in 2025. So yeah, that's the main thing on my TBR at this point. If I have time, I have a few of those Adaman short stories that I would like to go back and reread. The second, third, and fourth stories at this point, I need to go back and cover some of those for some certain reasons. But they're not super high priority. I have Don Quixote to get through at this point, and I also have Howling Dark, which is a little bit more priority as far as Ruocchio's writing is concerned. Also, I should mention, Ruocchio did send me a short story, a Sun Eater short story called Life. That's going to be part of a Kickstarter that's going to be running here soon, called Unbroken. If you haven't heard of that, I'll probably include a link down in the description below that will include a Sun Eater short story called Life. Christopher sent that to me a handful of days ago at this point, last week, I guess, at the time of this video's release, so a week ago or so, and I haven't read it yet. I'm going to read that in August. That is something that I will get done this month, even if I don't do the Adaman stuff. Either way, that's probably going to do it for this video. This is a little bit longer than I thought it would be, actually. Here I said I would waste no time and actually have a short video. It didn't end up happening. I apologize for that, but that is basically it. I thought that there would be a little bit more to talk about, and now that I'm at the end of the video here, I'm actually kind of glad there wasn't. But hey, that is all okay. The reading the rest of the year, I'll just say, is probably going to be a little bit more on the hit or miss side of things. We'll see what happens. I have ideas for how I'm going to schedule my reading the rest of the year, but there's just so much real life obligations that I've got, and then certain trips that I'm going to be taking at the end of the year where I have no idea how I'm going to fit certain things into my TBR in clean or smooth fashion. So you'll just have to bear with me each month as I kind of talk about this stuff, because it's going to get pretty messy here at some point. But I am mostly excited about all of it, so I hope to have you along for the ride, to join along with any of these things you may be interested in reading, or at least if you want to hear my thoughts on them, I appreciate that as well. I also appreciate you for sticking around and actually watching this video all the way through. If you did, it really does mean a lot to me. Thank you for watching. For now, I've been your host, King Crusoe. You can call me KC, and I hope to see you guys in the next video.